All right, welcome everybody. We are at our next division reveal. So we hit the halfway point or on Tuesday with the real reveal of the AFC South. We're going to change it up a little bit. And I know there's a lot of speculation in the Discord chat today about what division we're doing. So we'll get to that in a second. But I want to introduce my co-host Brian is with us again. Brian, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty well. We're a little
Awesome.
late tonight. Fine.
Yeah, a little late. We had some technical difficulties across the board, but we figured everything out and we are ready to go. So I also want to introduce Meeks. I know Meeks had his mic off just a minute ago. Let me see if he's back in and unmuted. Meeks, why don't, if you're there, go ahead and unmute yourself. And he might not be on his mic right now. Okay, Brian, if you
Yeah.
can keep an eye just when he's available. I don't know who we're starting with, but I'll let you go ahead and introduce the first team that we are unveiling tonight.
Okay. We're going to start with the Pittsburgh Steelers tonight. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go to Tubb, who is a fan of the team, but I don't think he's been the Steelers since I've been in the league. He's a longtime member. Um, Last year, he was the Detroit Lions. He was 60, 51, and 1, had 3 winning seasons, was 1 and 2 in the playoffs. So he had 2 playoff appearances. He's in a very tough division. It was Jump, me, and him kind of all battling in that division, with usually Jump coming out on top. He did pretty well with a rough Lions team last year, and he will have the Steelers this year. But let's
Yeah,
hear about the.
it's kind of interesting. I don't know why Tubb has never been the Steelers because I mean, he's obviously been a fan the whole time that he's been in the league, and he's been in our league for a long time now. I think
Mhm.
he came in this maybe the second season, something like that. Um, but yeah, just for whatever reason, he's never been Pittsburgh. So he got Pittsburgh this year. Um, Pittsburgh had a rough year in real life, obviously with the Big Ben injury, the loss of Le'Veon Bell, which I don't know that hurt him too much, the loss of Antonio Brown. So the previous year, their big three, they didn't have any of them really last year because I think Big Ben got hurt in week one, if I remember right, and was done for the year, week one or week two. But he's obviously returning this year, rated 81 overall. Not bad. Kind of that 88 throw power, which a lot of guys have in this cycle. Um, not much athleticism, but again, pretty good quarterback. But moving on, they've got David DeCastro, the highest rated player, right guard at 91 overall. Cameron Hayward, who was a menace last year in terms of pass rushing, at 90 overall. Um, Tubb will have the benefit of having Minka Fitzpatrick. He was traded during the season last year, so I'm pretty sure he was with the Dolphins because Ross was a big Alabama fan and kept him. So he'll be on Tubbs' roster this year. 87 overall free safety who can also play some corner. Stephon Tuitt at 87 overall. Juju Smith-Schuster at 86 overall. Um, Eric Ebron, a free agent addition at 84 overall at tight end. But this is a pretty defense heavy top of the roster. Again, with Cameron Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick, Stephon Tuitt, TJ Watt at 86 overall, probably a little bit underrated for as good as he is. Joe Hayden at 83 overall, a really solid offensive line. You've got three guys: DeCastro, Marquise Pouncey at 86 overall, and Alejandro Villanueva at 82 overall, left tackle. Three highly rated offensive linemen, which is good with a fairly statuesque Ben Roethlisberger behind him. But a pretty good top end roster, some decent depth to it as well. Again, not a great season last year, mostly because of injuries. They just got decimated by injuries. So a lot of talent. You got Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell Jr. Behind or backing up at running back. Ryan Switzer to play the slot. Derek Watt at fullback. I hate fullbacks, so whatever. But you got the other Watt brother. Um, they drafted Chase Claypool, who I believe is from Notre Dame. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. 70 overall wide receiver. So a lot of talent on this roster. We've talked about the age. Again, a roster that's a little bit older. Probably not as old as they have been in the past. But an aging roster. You've got guys either in their prime or maybe a little bit past their prime. So I'm sure Tubb will be looking to compete right away with the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that they have some key players that are definitely aging. You know, you mentioned Villanueva, Joe Hayden there. Cameron Hayward is kind of in his prime or kind of on the way out. Um, and of course Big Ben. But they also do have some pretty key young pieces in T.J. Watt, Juju, and James Conner. And I think those are kind of the big three there. And he can, if he can replace Ben um, fairly early on, I think he will set himself up for a pretty good cycle. He did a great job with what I would say a worse roster in Detroit, but with a similar issue with Matthew Stafford, an aging quarterback, and he was able to replace Stafford fairly early on and won a lot of games with that Lions roster. And I see him probably having a little bit more success with the Steelers here.
I agree. I think this roster is really well balanced. I mean, you mentioned James Conner, but some of that youth, Bud Dupree, 80 overall outside linebacker, James Washington, I think was a third round pick a few years ago at wide receiver. Devin Bush, the first round pick from a couple of years ago. So there's some good young players at some key positions, kind of spread throughout the roster. That I think will make it kind of an easier transition as you move on from maybe definitely Big Ben, but Cameron Hayward and some of these aging vets, Stephon Tuitt, who's getting up there a little bit. So you've got some guys that are coming in and ready to step up. I think, like you said, replacing Roethlisberger pretty quickly will be a big key. And Tubb did that pretty successfully with Detroit last year. I think he drafted a quarterback in either the first or the second draft, and kept that. I think he kept that guy the whole rest of the cycle and had some success with him. Um,
That
I can't remember who the
that's exactly.
quarterback was.
It was Clay Quigley.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yep.
Um, so
And
go ahead.
you mentioned Devin Bush, and last year, if you remember, he usured middle linebacker a lot with
Yep.
I want to say it was Jordan Tavai or
Yes,
something.
whatever that guy's
Tavai was
name is.
and I think Devin Bush just makes him extremely dangerous on the defensive side of the ball too, with a guy with that type of speed, and being able to use their middle linebacker very well. Probably one of the better user linebackers in our league.
Yeah.
Um, Tubb is.
Yep.
So I think that having a guy like Bush is perfect for his style of play on the defensive end as well.
Yeah, that's actually really I didn't even think about that. It's scary to think about Tubb, who I believe is maybe the best user middle linebacker, especially in terms of playing within our rules with using strafe and he anticipates route combinations really well and can cover a lot of the field. Now you give him a linebacker who's 90 speed, which Tavai was good, but he wasn't that good. Tubb really made him an impact player. So you get Devin Bush now secure the middle of the field, and maybe he lets Bush, be the CPU linebacker again with the Steelers playing the 3-4, and he uses Vince Williams, who's not as athletic, but 77 overall with 82 speed, as opposed to Devin Bush, who's 76 overall with 90 speed. So he may, allow Devin Bush to just kind of let the CPU do what they do, and he bolsters the other linebacker with Vince Williams. Now you got a middle of the field that you can't do anything with. So that's a scary thought for the rest of his division. Um, Again, we've talked about this with other guys and kind of a theme of our league. We only have a few guys that consistently use their favorite team or use their favorite team at all. This is Tubbs' first time in our league using the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in terms of a roster build. With the Detroit Lions, he may be more likely to get rid of Matt Stafford because he doesn't have any connection to him. Maybe it's a little bit tougher for him to move on from Ben Roethlisberger or, some of these other guys, Marquise Pouncey, when these vets start declining, how long does he hold on to him before he moves on? That's always going to be a key with someone using or controlling their favorite team.
And that's a very good point. Very good point. Because he clearly had no qualms about moving on from some very key players on that Lions team, and that might be different here with the Steelers.
Yeah. All right. So I think we've covered the Steelers pretty well. Do you have any final thoughts about them, about this matchup?
Not right now. I think we'll get into some interesting tidbits at the end,
All
though.
right. Good deal. All right, so let's wrap that up and we'll move on to our next team reveal.
Okay, so we're going to move on, and we're going to move on to the Cincinnati Bengals. And that's going to be taken over by a brand new owner. Um, again, coming over from another grown folks league here, and that is Houday. He's a Bengals fan. I believe he's Bengals in both OMFL and the Deuce, if I'm not mistaken, and he's going to be taking over the Bengals here as well. So for the trifecta. So yeah, brand new owner. Nothing really to go on from him from a record standpoint because we haven't seen him play at all. So some fresh blood for this division. Let's hear about this Bengals team. We know the big guy, Joe Burrow. Let's see what else is there.
Yeah, yeah. So this is kind of an underrated roster. Obviously they tanked out last year and had the first overall pick. But Joe Mixon, it's a really look. I should preface this. It's a pretty good offensive roster. There's some pieces there. You got Joe Mixon in the backfield, AJ Green, who is aging, but 88 overall, doesn't have the speed anymore, but hopefully, if these ratings work like they should be a catch and traffic monster. Tyler Boyd, who does have a little bit of speed. Um, to be able to stretch the field, although he's only 89 speed in the game. Auden Tate, who's I think is a pretty underrated guy. I had him in Carolina a couple of cycles. I think 2 cycles ago I had him as a kind of a second and third receiver. 76 overall, again, not a lot of speed, but pretty good maneuverability. Then you got, of course, John Ross, this field stretcher, who's been a horrible disappointment for the Bengals in real life after drafting him in the top 10. This, I believe, is the last year of his rookie contract. But the big piece is going to be that number one overall pick, Joe Burrow. 80 or 76 overall, not a ton of throw power, only 86 throw power. Good athlete, underrated athlete. 83 speed, 86 acceleration. I think EA did a good job of capturing that aspect of his game. Um, but yeah, this team is better than what they showed last year as a number one overall pick team. Geno Atkins, who I think was hurt all of last year, AJ Green missed all of last year as well. He's 88 overall. DJ Reader, so they have a pretty formidable or defensive line. DJ Reader's 84 overall is the other defensive tackle. Carlos Dunlap and Carl Lawson on the outside at 82 and 80 overall. So there's definitely some talent on the defensive side as well. William Jackson, 81 overall corner. Jesse Bates and Von Bell make up a really solid corner or defensive back, I guess safety tandem. 79 overall rating for both of them. And you've got Trey Waynes, former first round pick. Where was he drafted? Was it Detroit? I know he went to
Um,
Michigan State.
Minnesota drafted him.
Minnesota. So he's still rated pretty well, 78 overall with 93 speed. This is an underrated team, and I think it's Andy had a little bit of trouble with the Bengals last year, trying to replace Andy Dalton, and the division was just a terror last year with the users. That was a really tough division to play in the AFC North. So, obviously depending on Huday's ability and how he plays, but he's got some talent to work with this roster.
Yeah, and you mentioned Andy, and I think the one place that this roster was lacking, it was lacking a lot last year, but one of the big places it was lacking was in the trenches.
Yeah.
After Geno Atkins, they had not much on the defensive side of the ball, and their offensive line was pretty abysmal at the start of the cycle. And I don't think Andy ever really got those parts of the team where he truly wanted them during the cycle. I think that ended up hurting him, and that I think that's going to be key here because you mentioned some of the key skill player positions, brand new quarterback. They brought in DJ Reader to go alongside Atkins. Can he improve that offensive and defensive line and get it to where they can be successful for the entire cycle, and he can consistently run and pass the ball?
And you mentioned the offensive line, and it's pretty atrocious again. Their highest rated offensive lineman is Jonah Williams, who was their first round pick 2 years ago, who missed the entire season with a torn shoulder. He's 72 overall, so really his rookie year now, because since he didn't actually play his rookie year. And then they don't have another offensive lineman in the 70s. They've got a center that's 68 overall, Trey Hopkins, um, and Billy Price, left guard, 67 overall. So the offensive line is going to be an issue. It's going to be nice to have that athleticism of Joe Burrow. to be able to run around a little bit when the pass protection inevitably breaks down. So with all the talent, it's a really good point. And I didn't think about that looking at the first page. All the offensive talent they do have, can they actually put anything together when there's no time, maybe no run blocking, and you're trying to run holes that aren't there, no pass blocking, and Burrow doesn't really have time to sit back and let routes develop. That's going to be a key for this team.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the good thing is with Burrow, basically he's basically going to have 4 years of Burrow in the rookie deal, and I would say that like after the first two play seasons and going into that sim season and beyond, I think is when this team should be set up at that point to be ultra competitive, if not even before. You know what I mean? So I think that I think he has the time to use the draft and free agency to bolster some of these positions because I mean the guys that you can see there long term or the guys that they're his best players are still young. And I would say Reader, Mixon, and Burrow are the three that you expect to be there long term.
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting idea. So Hude being a Bengals fan, does he want to, really go into full rebuild mode this first season? Maybe look to trade AJ Green, Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, some of these older guys that have a little bit of value. Now, with our trade system and what guys look for from trades, you may not get what he thinks he probably should. But might be able to move and get a couple of second, third round, fourth round picks, something like that, something that he can then package and maybe try to get an extra first rounder to expedite the rebuild a little bit. But he's got his hands full. Again, there's a lot of good pieces here, but that offensive line is scary. How bad it is. I think it might be the worst offensive line in the game. Carolina Panthers. We'll see what theirs looks like, but this might be the worst offensive line in the game.
Yeah, and it's interesting if he is in fact Bengals in one or two other leagues, um, how does he take a different approach in each league? Right? Is he going to say, okay, this league I'm going to go full rebuild. This league I'm going to try to compete now and stick with my guys. Um, it'll be interesting to see if he takes a different approach there in other leagues because now he can kind of do one and be attached to players and one and just let loose. So.
Yeah, try to
Um,
experiment in one league or something.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that this team is it's going to be fun to watch. I think all the teams with these rookie quarterbacks. I mean, we've already revealed the Dolphins and the Chargers with Herbert and Tua. So these three rookie quarterbacks all probably going to be starting from day one. Uh, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with them.
Yeah, it'll be fun to track to see who has the most success, who gets bragging rights through the cycle with how they do with these rookies. And then who knows with the Packers when Jordan Love takes over or what happens with Jordan Love. Maybe he turns into trade bait that somebody else wants if Aaron Rodgers sticks around or if he prevents regression in some way. Yeah, so it's gonna be really interesting, a kind of a story of the league. What happens with these rookie quarterbacks?
100%.
All right, so I think that wraps up our Bengals talk, and we can move on to our next reveal.
Yeah, so I see Meeks is still on mute, but we're going to reveal his team here. And if he's around and wants to join and talk about it, he can here. But Meeks is going to be going back to his favorite team. He was the Ravens a couple cycles ago, I know for sure, and he's going to take them over again this year. Last year he was the Titans. He struggled a little bit. He was 38 and 74 overall. He did have one winning season and a playoff appearance, though he was 0-1 in the playoffs. And he started having more success once he got a season or two with Lamar Jackson under his belt. He traded for Lamar Jackson fairly early on. Had to spend a lot of draft capital to get him, and I think that kind of hurt his team building a little bit. But he is going to have Lamar Jackson now from the very start, and rated better than he was at the start of last cycle. So it's going to be interesting to see Meeks with this Ravens team.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I know Lamar Jackson was frustrating last season because his throw ratings were so poor that he was almost unusable, especially with the all Madden settings that we had. But now he comes in at 94 overall. Again, the incredible speed, 96 speed, 96 acceleration, which I think he got faster. I think he was 94 speed last year, so they rated him faster for some reason. But 92 throw power, and I actually want to look and see if I can pull up his accuracies real quick to see what those look like. Throw under pressure. Don't care about that. Let's see. So his short accuracy is 92, medium accuracy is 83, deep accuracy is 86, play action 85 or 89, and then throw on the run 95. So that's a far cry from where he was. I think he came in rated around 76 to 78 overall, something like that, with the opening ratings last year. So Meeks traded for him. He gave up a couple of first rounders, I believe, to get him to the Titans, and had really a kind of a cool offense that he ran, similar to what I like to run with Cam, but obviously a more dynamic playmaker with Lamar. Um, but struggled to find really consistent success, and I think those accuracies played a big role in that. So having that 94 overall Lamar will help, surely. And we talked about this with these contenders, Kansas City, San Francisco. This team is loaded up and down the roster. Calais Campbell, 95 overall, Ronnie Stanley, 93 overall. Not as much, 90 plus overall talent, but then you add in Marlon Humphrey, 89 overall, Earl Thomas, 88 overall, um, Marcus Peters, 85 overall, Jimmy Smith, 83 overall. Again, another loaded defensive backfield to try to combat some of the pass game. The offensive line is strong with Ronnie Stanley at 93 overall, Orlando Brown Jr. At 83 overall, DJ Fluker at 80 overall. Um, that's all I see on the first page, but that's three pretty well rated offensive linemen and three of your five. Obviously, you've got Justin Tucker with the importance of the kicking game, best kicker in the game. Um, the tight ends, Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle. They did trade the guy from South Carolina who got hurt early on. I can't think of his name right now. What
Hayden
was?
Hurst with
Yeah,
the
Hayden
Falcons.
Hurst. Yeah, so he's with the Falcons now. So not maybe as much three tight end formations, but still with the two tight ends that are really well rated, good pass catchers. Mark Ingram at the halfback position. It's this is just a really stacked roster that I mean, anyone with the Ravens would look to compete right away, and they were a very popular choice with our team selection.
Yeah, I mean they're a very popular choice, and Meeks has been around as long, if not longer, than I have here. He's was one of our early members from the very start, and he's been a Ravens fan. So he was going to get his first shot at him, and he wanted him this year. So I do see that he is off mute. Meeks, if you wanted to jump in and talk a little bit about the Ravens and what you're excited about.
Yeah, y'all can hear me?
Yeah, there he
Yep.
is.
Yeah, I mean Lamar. Look, I mean that's really the biggest thing, Lamar. Even when I was with the Titans last year, and I traded for Lamar. It was hard for me to actually build a team around Lamar because I really couldn't find that receiver that I needed to kind of stretch the field until late. I think Tampa Bay probably had let Scotty Miller hit the free agency at one point, and so that's when I kind of took him over. And he actually helped out a little bit, but after that, it wasn't. I just really couldn't get anything to click, honestly.
Yeah, and so what do you think about? I mean, the Ravens pass catchers aren't outstanding. I'm trying to look. I know,
Uh,
is it Willie Snead? Is Willie Snead the highest rated receiver? Oh, Marquise Brown. Okay, Hollywood. I forgot about him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got Hollywood Brown to stretch the field. Yeah, Willie Snead, Miles Boykin, Chris Moore, Devin Duvernay. It's not a super talented receiving core. But then you add in obviously Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, who was a steal for them. I think he took him in the second round out of Ohio State. He's a pretty good pass catcher. What do you think about the talent of the offensive weapons around Lamar with this team versus what you had with the Titans last year?
um, I mean, with the Titans, I was just honestly, I mean, for the first couple of seasons, it was mainly Corey Davis, who I kind of disliked over time. Uh, AJ Brown did pretty decent early on. He kind of helped out, but at the same time, I was still kind of learning the offense or trying to figure out the offense as I went. So I really couldn't open anything up with him. Uh, I mean, and then with the tight ends, I think I stuck out with Delaney Walker and John Smith. So I mean, just in comparison, I mean, this Ravens team is definitely far better than when I had when I was in Titans last year.
Yeah, and we know Hollywood Brown with that speed. He was a very successful wide receiver last cycle. He got traded at least once, if not twice. You know, people wanted that speed, and people were
Yeah,
successful. So even though he's not rated the greatest from an overall perspective, that speed can still kill, and it'll be interesting to see combining that speed over the top with like Mark Andrews and your running backs underneath. I mean, you gotta. I think you got some options to have some success very early on.
yeah. And if not, I do have a plan to try and acquire somewhat of a veteran presence at the wide receiver to
All
pair
right.
with Hollywood. So
Well, go ahead and spill
we'll
the
see how that
beans.
works
Let
out.
us know. Let us know what the plan is. I'm kidding. You obviously don't tell us that, but
Yeah,
um,
I can't. I'm a scout. I'm a scout I'm a scout the rosters. Mainly once the game comes out. I'm gonna scout the rosters. I guess everybody really will be able to get a feel for their team and see who should be available and who they want to keep. So
yeah, yeah, for sure. Some in-season trades. Maybe that first season, as guys try to add the missing piece, especially the contenders. Um,
yeah.
so what's your expectation, man? I know last cycle was rough with the Titans. What's your expectation
Yeah.
with the Ravens this cycle?
Uh, I hope to play a little bit better. I hope that, well, not even a little bit. I hope to play better, much better than I did last season. So hopefully I'll be able to, sneak into the playoffs. It should help with the seventh, with that addition of the 17 each conference. So that should help. That should give me a motivation to try to make the playoffs. Offensively, I'm gonna try to stick with the base Ravens offense. So I'm actually probably gonna work on that on Madden 20 probably tonight just to get a feel for it.
That's a good idea.
And then defensively, I'm just gonna be aggressive. I have to be aggressive, mainly with the big guys up front. You got the young linebackers, the pretty stout safeties as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, that safety tandem
um,
with Earl and who's the other safety? I'm blanking on it.
uh,
I can't think of
I
who it
believe
is.
it. Well, honestly, I'll probably end up moving Jimmy Smith to safety
Oh, okay.
if I can, if I can. And then so that'll still leave me with Marlon Humphrey, Peters, Savon Young, who's a great slot corner,
Yeah.
nickel corner. So yeah, it should work out.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the better secondaries. And then I know their one kind of hole last year was the middle linebacker position, and they drafted
Patrick Queen.
Patrick Queen.
Yeah.
Yep, out of um
Oklahoma.
where was Oklahoma. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
they got him I
that'll
think in
be
the second round too. I don't know. I don't know how they had so many picks, but they had a great draft for obviously drafting at the end of the round. But yeah, I think Queen fell to them in the second round or maybe late first.
Yeah, it
late.
was first.
Late first,
Patrick
yeah.
Queen from LSU.
Oh, LSU. Who's the dude from Oklahoma? Who am I thinking of?
Kenneth Murray.
Kenneth
Yeah,
Murray.
There you
Yeah,
go. Yeah, that's right.
So
Kenneth Murray.
Well,
yes,
I do have one more question, Meeks, just about the roster a little bit. So obviously it's a really talented roster, but it's a fairly old roster, especially on the defensive end, or the defensive
Yeah,
side. That defensive line is up there in age. Obviously Earl Thomas is getting up there. There's some good young pieces, but it's going to be interesting. Do you think that I mean, ideally you're going to be drafted toward the end of the first round with as much talent as on here. How much of a role it will be trading be? I know you haven't been, outside of the Lamar trade last year, you're not super active in trading. Do you think you might be a little bit more active with that? Are you going to be looking to be super active in free agency? You have any ideas about that?
uh, it's gonna be tough because actually, even when I think about it, it's just because really I want to say probably the first 3 seasons will be tough, mainly because I have to decide to pay Ronnie Stanley,
Yeah,
Marlon Humphrey, and then I think right after that it's gonna be Lamar. So
yeah,
I'll probably try to be a big player in free agency this time around because I think mainly for the all previous cycles, I always would actually try to exhaust all my money in the free agency and then kind of build the rest of the team through the draft. But I'll actually probably spend more on certain big players in the free agency rather than just spread it all out.
Yeah.
So that should help me out a little bit. That should help out.
Brian, you got any other questions?
No, I think you hit the main ones there for Meeks. So, Meeks, thanks for jumping and joining. If you want to stick around, we're going to do a little bit of overall division discussion and predictions at the end. You're welcome to stick around and jump in there as well. But thanks for coming on.
No problem.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, so we got one more team to unveil. Obviously, the last team. Actually, I don't even know who it is. I forgot who we unveiled. So go ahead, Brian.
Yep. So last team is the Cleveland Browns. Actually, our last Super Bowl winner was the Cleveland Browns, ran by Drew, but he's not taking them over this year. Our former Jaguars owner is taking them over, and that is Rob. I don't have Rob's stats. He had to step down from the Jaguars. I think second to last season, last cycle. So his overall numbers weren't available, but we do know he had some pretty successful seasons, and he just seemed to keep on drafting X Factor and superstar ability guys on the defensive side of the ball. And I think at one point he had like 6 or 7 guys on the defensive side of the ball, all with abilities. So he was my big trade partner. I dealt, I think I got 3 players from him, 2 or 3 players from him last year. So, yeah, him as the Jaguars owner last year is going to be taking over the Browns this year. It's going to be pretty dangerous. So let's see what that Browns team looks like.
Yeah, so the Browns were the hot team last year after their big offseason in real life. We had Cavs that originally had him because he was a longtime member, and then he bounced and quit Madden and became a dick. So, but I believe Cleveland was not as highly sought after this year, if I'm right, Brian.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Rob was the one to have Cleveland on his list. Hence why he got them. And so I believe they were his second choice, but slotting in there on the Browns with him being the only one that had him on the list.
Yeah, so
got-
still a lot of talent on the roster. Probably not as highly rated as they were last season. But you got Myles Garrett who signed a big contract in the offseason after he smoked the Steelers quarterback in the head with a helmet, so he got a big bonus reward for that. Nick Nick Chubb, who's 92 overall now, yeah, with Kareem Hunt, so they still have Kareem Hunt on the roster as well. 87 overall, probably the best halfback tandem in the league. Odell there at 91 overall. Jarvis Landry took a little bit of a bump, but he's still 85 overall. They signed Austin Hooper in the offseason, gave him a $60 million contract for a tight end. He's 89 overall after his big season. So there's a ton of talent on the offensive end. Baker Mayfield, I think, took a little bit of a hit in his rating. He's at 78 overall. They still have Njoku, too, who I know is asked to be traded in real life, but hasn't been traded. So he's there at 78 overall. There's just a ton of talent on the offensive end. And they did a pretty good job in the offseason of bolstering some weak areas. Their offensive line was a bit of a fiasco last year. It's still not really highly rated, but Joel Bitonio's back, 86 overall guard. J.C. Treader, who I think they added in the offseason the previous year at center. Jack Conklin at right tackle, former Indianapolis Colt. So they've upgraded some areas. It's a pretty balanced roster, up and down. Let me get to the second page a little bit and see what their depth looks like. Greedy Williams from LSU, they drafted 75 overall. Mac Wilson, who they drafted 2 years ago from Alabama, came out a year early. Probably should have gone back, but he's a really, really good player. 75 overall. Rashard Higgins from Colorado State, I believe he like set some records at Colorado State for catching passes. 74 overall. So, Jedrick Wills, that was their first round pick this year, out of Alabama, left tackle. Um, so they've got some good depth to go with their top end talent. This is a really good roster, and I'm kind of surprised that there weren't more people that were interested in taking them this year.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. You listed, all the key guys there. Um, with Myles Garrett getting that big contract, obviously Odell has a big deal too there already. I think Cap's going to be kind of an interesting item, and also if Baker Mayfield's going to be the long-term answer there. At 78 overall, I believe he's entering his
This is the
third
third
season,
year. Yeah.
third year. So um, Rob's not going to have a whole lot of time to figure out whether Baker's the guy or not. He's going to have to make a decision before our third season, for the sim season, and he might be going in a different direction, especially if the cap becomes an issue for this team. And then you also mentioned the dual running back, and we kind of talked a little bit about Le'Veon Bell and how good of a pass catcher he is, and how that might be more valuable as Madden. And Kareem Hunt's pretty much the same type of guy. He's very good out of the backfield as a pass catcher, and that's kind of how they used him at the end of the year in real life. So if he is able to use him as a pass catcher, that really gives him the opportunity to have both Chubb and Hunt on the field at the same time and do a lot of different things with them and use them both to their full potential, because they're both rated really well. And if he decides he wants to trade one, there's going to be a market for either one of them.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to bring up. Cavs traded Kareem Hunt before the start of the first season last year. I think just for a second round pick, if I remember right. And then Kareem Hunt went on to win multiple MVP awards with the Bucks. Bucks had a couple of different users, but Kareem Hunt was a standard there. Really effective in the run game. I think he scored 20 plus touchdowns like three of our 7 seasons or something like that. Ended up having a great career throughout that last cycle. So, yeah, again, you make a great point about the salary cap. Miles Garrett's contract, Odell's contract, Austin Hooper with the big deal, Joel Bitonio got a big deal, Jarvis Landry is kind of at the end of his deal. Um, they've got a lot of high priced guys that they're paying right now because they're not paying Baker all that much, even though he's a first number one overall pick. His contract is still fairly manageable, and Nick Chubb on a rookie contract as well. They got Kareem Hunt for cheap because he got cut from Kansas City after his alleged domestic violence stuff, which turned out to, I guess, not be true or something like that. So there's going to be a lot of contracts that come up to for re-signs right as these bigger contracts are kind of coming into their end. And with the way Madden does it, I know this from being the Panthers with Cam and Luke. There a lot of times there's a huge jump in the last year of these deals with these stock contracts. So if that's true for this team, there's going to be some big decisions to make for Rob on who to keep and who to trade and who to let go to free agency.
Yeah, and Rob too. He's last year was very active trading, and like I mentioned, when I was talking about him when I was announcing his team, me and him traded twice or two or three times last year. I remember I got Telvin Smith from him, and then Miles Jack from the Jaguars, and uh, he's willing to let guys go. I don't believe the Browns are like his favorite team or anything along those lines. So he's not really going to be beholden to any of these players. And um, when you're up against a salary cap, you need to use basically every kind of avenue open to you in order to build a roster. And he seems to be a guy that does that. And he drafted really well last year with all the ability guys he kept on getting, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And that's where this team is really going to need the most work, I think, long term, is the defensive side of the ball. So uh, I I think it's really interesting to see him take over this team, and I think he has potential to have a lot of success with it.
Yeah, he probably is between him and Forthy and maybe one other person last year for the best drafter. Um, I don't understand how he got so many guys with superstar and X Factor development on the defensive side. You mentioned, Sixers. I believe he had 8 guys at one time, 8 starters that were superstar X Factor development, so they had abilities. It was insane the way he was able to draft. So I don't know if that's a fluke. That last year was the first year that Rob was in the league, so he obviously made a good impression in terms of his roster building. And like you said, very active in trading. He was pretty active in free agency as well, if I remember right. So I think he's gonna have his hands full, but he set a pretty good precedent for himself of his ability to manage the cap and manage a roster. So I fully expect him to be able to manage all of that again this year and keep this roster, which is again pretty good from the start. in a really tough division too, keep this roster afloat and keep them competitive throughout this cycle.
Yeah, and I think early success is really going to depend on that defense. They got Miles Garrett, but and I think they're a little average everywhere else, kind of on that defense.
The defensive
And
backfield is pretty good. They've got Denzel Ward. They drafted Greedy Williams, who's he's not rated great, but he's 75 overall. Decent safety tandem in Carl Joseph and Andrew Sendejo. Adrian Claiborne from the Falcons signed there. Sheldon Richardson. They still have Olivier Vernon. It's a pretty good defense too. That especially that front seven or the front four. The linebacking group is a little bit shallow, but it's a good defensive backfield too. So I don't know, man. I think this defense, like you said, it's going to carry them, and I think it's better than people maybe remember. I don't know what their stats look like in real life last year, but it's rated fairly well for what would seem to be an underrated or not a great defense. They also drafted Grant Delpit from LSU, underrated free safety who had a really good college career. So I think this defense is going to be okay. It's got enough good young pieces to where maybe he can focus on bolstering the offensive line a little bit more. And then again, if he drafts like he did last year, he's going to have this team set up well for the whole cycle.
yeah, and I mean, I didn't realize the defense was, as rated as well as you just mentioned. That really puts an interesting twist on this division too, because other than the Bengals, I think the other three teams are all set up pretty well to be competitive from day one.
Yeah.
And I think that creates a very interesting battle to be had here for the division.
Well, and we kind of saw that. I guess we can kind of transition into division talk now. We saw that last cycle. With Pittsburgh, it was really kind of Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cleveland that battled it out because that Bengals roster was in such bad shape. But they split it up pretty well, and we had Drew that added in. I think in the fourth season as Cleveland, something like that. He added in kind of the second half of the cycle. And he again adapted really well back to the game. But the captain, we mentioned his success with Pittsburgh, and then Forthy with the Ravens had a lot of success as well. Not as many playoff appearances, but he was kind of always in that division. The division was always really tight. So you can definitely see that again with these three teams, and then depending on how the Bengals roster shapes up and how these rookies progress that they had, that could be another team that adds into this kind of this 4 team division that can make it really close and really tight throughout the cycle.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I mean, there's a couple teams here that kind of have some aging players, the Steelers and the Ravens, that are going to require, you know, going to require you to stay on top of like those teams and continue to build on them so you don't kind of age out. I think that the Browns are probably the most balanced from a youth and veteran standpoint, and they might be kind of the favorite for just sustained success throughout the entire cycle, just because I think they have the best balance between young and old. Um, I don't think they have the best roster right now, but I do think they have the best balance. And Cincinnati obviously is the youngest team in that division. So it's going to require a rebuild, but there's a possibility that by the end of the cycle they're the most dominant team.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. A lot of times the best division. Well, I guess this isn't true for Madden. I was going to say the best team in the division comes down to the best quarterback, but that's not always true in Madden. But you've got Lamar Jackson on his rookie deal. You've got um, Baker Mayfield on his rookie deal. Obviously, Joe Burrow just being drafted, and then Roethlisberger at the end of his career. So Pittsburgh's probably the only team that really needs to make a decision about the quarterback. The other 3 teams could be set for the cycle at that, depending on what Cleveland decides with Baker, and assuming that Baltimore keeps Lamar. It could be the most set division in terms of quarterback play for the cycle, assuming Pittsburgh finds theirs pretty early on.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point. I mean we haven't had we were kind of talking a little bit about it too with the AFC East on Tuesday. They're kind of in a similar situation with everyone, but uh,
New England.
New England and potentially the Jets
Yeah.
as quarterback. So yeah, I mean it's definitely an interesting scenario here, and we talked about how the AFC East was dominated by some good secondaries, and with the exception of the Bengals here, every team in this division has a dominant pass rusher.
Yeah.
TJ Watt, you're looking at um,
Calais
uh,
Campbell in Baltimore.
Calais
Miles
Campbell
Garrett.
Oh, there's
and
Cooley.
Yep,
and
Miles Garrett.
finally you got Garrett and Vernon there in Cleveland. So this might be the division where it's dominant pass rush, right, to watch out for on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you consider Geno Atkins. I don't remember if he really had much of a pass rush ability in Madden last year, but he would probably be the best pass rusher on the Bengals as an interior lineman, which may not be the greatest thing. But yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the Bengals, the Bengals roster is just it's really far behind the other three teams. It's obviously the weakest roster at the start, despite some of the talent they have on offense. That's going to be the biggest build. These other rosters, I think I agree with you, Brian. I think Cleveland is the best setup for long-term success. Baltimore's got some pieces, but they're going to have to replace some guys on defense. Pittsburgh's going to have to replace some guys on offense and defense. They're probably the oldest roster in this division. And then the Bengals are going to be going through this rebuild, see what they can do. Maybe flipping Geno Atkins and AJ Green for a couple of draft picks to help speed that process up. But this is going to be a really fun division. It was a great division to follow last year. I think almost every season it came down to the wire in terms of playoff seeding and playoff spots, and I fully expect that again this year.
Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, I'd be interested to see what Cooley joining us, what he thinks from a prediction standpoint. See if Meeks wants to jump in as well, and do some projections for the cycle.
Um, well, yeah. I mean, you guys have covered the rosters pretty well. Um, so, I mean, the predictions. I mean, you can have a great roster, but if you're not a very good user, it won't matter a whole lot. So this division has four really good rosters. I know you guys don't know who they, but I've played him, I believe, in the other league, and he's a very good user. Um, so he's going to make this division really interesting because I mean we all know Meeks and Tubb are very good, and then Rob, um, you know, when he had the Jaguars and all those superstars on defense, I mean that was a tough team. Um, so all four of these guys are really good. Meeks with that offense, I mean he had Lamar Jackson with the Titans, but now that he's uh, super rated, uh, that's gonna be
That's a great way to put it.
he's gonna be hard to handle because he was really good with him with the Titans. I mean, I know his record didn't reflect that, and a lot of that I think is because he lost more early on. Because at the end, um, I played him, I know, and I don't know if I won or not, but I know I had a hard time with his with Lamar Jackson running and with him being the cover cover boy, he's going to be um, that Ravens team is going to be hard to beat. And then the Browns, I mean, they were the Madden darling last year, and so they're not gonna take them down too much. I mean, they've got a lot of good pieces there. I mean, if I had to choose, I would say probably the Ravens and the Browns are the top two. The problem with the Steelers is you've got Tubb, and he's really good. I mean, he took a Detroit team that didn't have a whole lot and had them in the mix every year in a really tough division. I mean, he's been around. He's always in the playoff mix. So this is a tough division, and I'm interested to kind of see how it plays out. But I would think that the Ravens and Browns would have the upper hand to have the best cycles.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to provide a little insight on Houday since obviously Brian and I haven't played him. He hadn't been in the league, but you got to play him in a couple other or in another league. So I had an idea about what his talent level as a user, as a player would be, comparable to this league, or this division. I'm with you. I think, it's we look at the roster and I think it's pretty obvious to me anyway that the Ravens have the best rated roster from top to bottom, just with the abilities and the talent at every position group. And you're hearing rumblings from the beta about Lamar being the next, Madden Mike Vick, from 2006 or whatever that was when he was unstoppable. And Meeks had that practice with him last year and really had that offense humming at the end of the cycle, with the read option and being able to get all of that going. So I think Meeks is probably going to have the most success early on until he has to figure out how to replace some of those aging pieces on defense, what to do with a Lamar contract that's going to be eventually signed, and how to kind of build that roster around. I actually think, with your feedback on the Bengals, I think the Bengals, because of this number one overall draft class and Joe Burrow and all the guys that they
Now,
were able to get, I think the Bengals are going to have a really good chance to be at the top of this division for the rest of the cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think I'm going to go against the grain a little bit. I think for season one, I think Tubb and the Steelers might be the most dangerous team. I think that they're rated fairly well. Um, Other than Lamar, they have the second best quarterback in the division right now in Ben Roethlisberger. Um, and I think that, I think after the first season, I think regression is going to hit a lot of those players hard. And I think that Tubbs going to have to go through a mini rebuild. But I think for season one, I think him along with the Ravens are going to be 1-2 and very close to start the cycle off. Um, but I think that over the course of the cycle, I think the Ravens and the Browns are going to be kind of the consistent performers, though, at the top, if we're looking at like 6, 7 seasons as a whole.
if Tubb messes around and gets a good quarterback like he did last cycle, that's to replace Roethlisberger, then he'll be a force in that division.
Yeah, I wonder if just and this don't mean to harp on Tubb, but him getting away from Jump. I know Jump just gave him so much trouble last cycle, and Jump gave everybody trouble with the Bears. But
Yeah,
having to
really.
play that twice a year, and often that was a decider between him, winning a division or being a wild card team, or being a wild card team and out of the playoffs. Um, there's a psychological aspect to that. So I think that's a good point. This division is gonna be so much fun, man, because it's three users that I know of that are really good. Cooley, I'll take your word with Houday that he's good as well. And then obviously we know the
Yeah.
roster building of ability of Rob from last year, what he was able to do with the Jaguars, to what Tubb was able to do with just a historically awful Detroit Lions franchise. And then Meeks building his roster with the Titans and acquiring Lamar and kind of building around it. I think it's gonna be really fun to see where these rosters go, how they replace aging veterans, how they work around big contracts and stay around the salary cap.
Yeah, and I'd be interested. Meeks is still in here. I'm seeing. I don't know if he wants to jump in and if he wants to give a prediction for the cycle or for the division, or if he just wants to keep the bulletin board material to a minimum. I'm not sure. But, uh, Meeks, if you want to jump in and give any further input, you're welcome to here.
I think he's staying out of the headlines.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'll chime in.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I mean, I appreciate the kind words, Cooley, but I mean, I hope to come out on top at least within the first two seasons, and then, because just like everybody said, the Bengals. I mean, after the first couple of seasons, because I believe that I mean, on paper, their roster is pretty stacked, but once they get fairly rated or add some more players, they should be a team to compete as well. So it should be a fun cycle within the division. So I definitely can't wait. I definitely can't wait. And then we got 3 fans of each team, in the division, so that should play a part as well to make it far competitive.
Yeah, that might be the
But
most unique. That might be the most like teams or users taking over their favorite team that we have in the league. With Meeks in Baltimore, obviously Tubb in Pittsburgh, Houday in
Cincy.
Cincinnati. Yeah, sorry. And then Rob would be the only one, I guess, in Cleveland that's not you taking his favorite team. So I like that observation. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking about all the divisions we revealed and have yet to reveal, and I don't think we have another division that has this many. So that's a very good point there, Meeks, and I think that does add a little bit of intrigue too, with the team building aspect that like we discussed.
Always just a little bit harder to build your team because you have a little bit of. I mean, no matter how much I want to, like if I'm playing with my favorite team, it's hard to get rid of some of those guys that you root for every Sunday.
oh yeah,
They've kind of been there forever. It's
oh yeah,
always a
definitely.
little harder.
So Meeks, what is your thought on that? I mean, I know you've been in the Ravens in the past in our league. Do you have a hard time moving on from some of those guys if it's just not working?
Uh, not kind of, sort of, but not really. Um, yeah, kind of. I mean, even with previous cycles, I mean, of course, when I had to play with Joe Flacco for a couple of times, it was like, man, I might as well ride out that contract, mainly because it was horrible. But I
Yeah,
mean,
but
even you know,
what if you'd had Ed Reed back in the day and he was starting to decline? Would you want to get rid of him or would you hang on? Because you're like,
oh
oh
yeah,
man, it's Ed Reed. I can't get rid of him.
nah. If it's time to go, it's time to go.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's time to go, I mean, especially back then when the regression actually hit hard.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, if somebody was like rated like 88 or something, and then probably after 2 years they drop down to about a 76 or 74, then it's time to go.
The
All right.
the
It could
harder
definitely be
ones
time to
are
go.
are when they're still good, but you could get something for them,
Yeah, that is true.
but it's hard to get. It's hard to be like, well, this is a smart move, but I might just ride it out anyway because I like them.
Yeah, but now, but I think with this team, I think the only one that, well, I don't even want to reveal it, but there's definitely gonna be some players I'm gonna have to make a hard decision on whether to let go or not. That's what I'll say.
All right. All right, man. Well, Meeks, again, we appreciate you joining us and chiming in. You did a good job of keeping the bulletin board material out of there, so you're not adding any extra motivation to your fellow division mates. But we
Oh
appreciate
yeah,
the time.
no problem. Thank you.
All right, man.
It's always it's nice to definitely chat with y'all.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
Anytime,
absolutely.
anytime. All right, guys. Well, I think we did a pretty good job covering this. You guys, Cooley, Brian, you have any final thoughts about the division?
Not this division, but uh, I'm excited now that we're more than halfway through the reveal, and we got 12 more teams left, and I think people are starting to figure out now who they got as the options diminish. Um, but yeah, I think I'm excited now to reveal the rest of the teams and to get started.
Um, yeah, I'll just say that Meeks and Tubb are two of my favorite guys to play in the league. So I really kind of like this division because they've been here a while and they're both really good. And I always have great games against them, and I mean, they just play the way that our league wants to play. You don't ever have to worry about them doing something that you think is in a gray area. So I really appreciate those guys, and it's always fun games. They're good players, so this will be and Houday is a good player too. I mean, I've not played him with our rules, but we already know what Rob's done. So I'm excited about this division, and I'm excited to reveal. My team hasn't been revealed yet, and but you guys have. So
Yeah.
My team hasn't been reviewed yet either, so
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, mine is the only one out of
oh,
our
that's
announcer
right.
group.
That's right.
So yeah, I'll be super disappointed when Cooley gets his team. He doesn't know what it is yet, but he's gonna be disappointed, I think. All right, guys. I agree. I'm really excited about this division. I love that we have three-fourths of this division of users taking their favorite teams. With two long-term guys with Tubb and Meeks who don't always use their teams. Again, we mentioned Tubb. This is the first time he's had the Steelers in our league, and then Meeks going back to the Ravens after a couple of, I think, 2 years away. So this should be really fun to see, how they do with their favorite teams, who they get frustrated with, and trade out of anger maybe, or cut them out of anger. But it'll be a lot of fun to track this. So, Brian, why don't you tell us when our next reveal is?
So our next reveal is going to be Sunday evening, sometime around 10 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to be revealing four more teams then. And it'll be next week will be our last week of reveals. We'll be doing Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and the following week after that is release week, I believe.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
um, we're going to be coming right up to it. And we'll be getting the cycle started now in probably less than a month at this point. So we're counting down the days.
Man, it's coming up. You forget how late in the year it is because we don't have any preseason. Typically, the Hall of Fame game would have been last weekend, I think, and we'd be getting it in the first weekend of full preseason games. But obviously, with no preseason in real life, it kind of sneaks up on you. So, like Brian said, we got three more divisions to reveal. So one more week. We'll be done a week from tonight, and then we'll start getting into some excitement about release, some new rule things that we're looking into. We'll definitely have some shows, some TFL shows going into that week of release, and getting some excitement about the upcoming cycle. So that'll do it for us. Cooley, appreciate you jumping on a little bit later. I know you had some wife duties that you had to fulfill, so we appreciate the time. Brian, as always, it's been fun. I know we're excited to reveal the next division on Sunday. Four more teams, four more users. Hopefully, we'll get to talk to a few of them, and we'll see you guys then.
Adios.
Yeah, thanks for having me.